All right, so this is Chapter 1, Lesson 2, Complex Fractions and Unit Rates. And you should recognize the word complex fraction from Chapter 0, so you'll see how they come in handy again here in Chapter 1. So our vocabulary for the lesson: complex fraction is a fraction made up of two or more fractions. So we could write a couple examples here, maybe the example 1/2 over 3/5. And if we wanted to solve that, we know that's a division problem. We would take the outers and the inners and multiply and then set them up as a fraction and simplify. Another example might be 2 over 1 4/5. So we have a big fraction with a smaller fraction inside. And again, we would change the denominator to an improper fraction. We would change 2 to 2 over 1 and then do outers over inners. Our notes for Chapter 1, Lesson 2. A complex fraction is used to find a unit rate if the rate contains a fraction. So back in Chapter 1, Lesson 1, we talked about finding unit rates by doing some division with the denominator, and we saw all whole number denominators and some fraction denominators, or decimal denominators. Now we're going to see them with fractions, and very, very easy with the help of the complex fraction. Two examples. Here's number 1. Andy walked 7/8 of a mile in 1/3 of an hour. Find Andy's rate in miles per hour. So miles per hour means miles in 1 hour, so we're finding a unit rate. So remember to write this. We always want to try for money in the top, time in the bottom. No money, but we do have time, so it's going to be 7/8 of a mile in the numerator and 1/3 of an hour in the denominator. Time in the bottom. If you needed that second bit of reassurance, the question does state to find Andy's rate in miles per hour. So that's miles over hours. So what we want to do here is we want to figure out how far and how Andy's rate in miles per hour. We want to find out how many miles Andy can walk in 1 hour. So we want to solve this rate for 1 hour. And remember how we did that in in Chapter 1, Lesson 1. We divided by the number in the denominator. So 1/3 divided by 1/3 equals 1. 7/8 divided by 1/3, well, I'm not sure what that is, so that's when my complex fraction is going to come in. 7/8 divided by 1/3. Do not change the order. Right? Outers over inners, we will do 7 times 3 first, which is 21. And inners, 8 times 1 is 8. Well, we're not happy with that as a final answer, so we are going to do some division because that's an improper fraction. We want to change it to a mixed number. 8 goes into 21 twice. 2 times 8 is 16. And we subtract and get a 5. Now remember, don't add a decimal. You just want to stop right here, and we can take our 5 and our 8 and make that our fraction piece. So our final answer is 2 5/8 miles per 1 hour. So our final answer is this entire unit rate right here, because the question asks his rate in miles per hour. Okay, so same thing we did in Lesson 1, except now we're doing it with fractions. And I do think it's best to show your work off on the side here. I do think it's best to show your division signs like I did here to remind you that you're just taking a rate and converting it to a unit rate. All right, last example. Pat baked 60 cookies in 1.5 hours. How many cookies will Pat make in 2 hours? Well, this is a unit rate problem, but it's one of those problems like the Rachael Ray dog food problem, where, remember this one from Lesson 1, where we had to find the unit rate and then use our unit rate to help us solve another question. So the first thing I want to do is I want to figure out how many cookies Pat can bake in 1 hour, and then I can use that number to help me solve for 2 hours. So remember, money in the top, time in the bottom, right? Money over time. We don't have money, but we do have time. So we're going to write 60 cookies per 1½ hours. So there's our time. Now what we want to do first is to figure out how many cookies Pat can bake in 1 hour, and then we can use that unit rate to figure out how many cookies she can make, or he can make, I don't know if Pat's a girl or a boy here, in 2 hours. So we will divide by the number in the denominator. So we're going to divide by 1½ Every time we want to find a unit rate, we divide by the number in the denominator. Okay, 1½ divided by 1½ is 1. And that's the first thing we need here is we need our unit rate. We can then take our unit rate and solve the next question. So 60 divided by 1/2, I have no clue what that is off the top of my head. So I will use a complex fraction to solve this problem. So 60 divided by 1½ Well, before I can solve that, I have to turn them both into improper fractions. So 60 becomes 60 over 1. And 1½ we're going to multiply and then add. 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3. So I get 3/2. So now I do my outers. 60 times 2 is 120. And we do the inners. 1 times 3 is 3. And 120 divided by 3 is 40. So that 40 goes up in my denominator. Up in my numerator. What am I saying here? So my answer so far is that Pat can make 40 cookies in 1 hour. But the question doesn't ask how many cookies Pat can make in 1 hour. The question asks how many cookies can Pat make in 2 hours. So that means I have to take my unit rate and I have to solve for 2 hours. How do I turn a 1 into a 2? Well, I multiply by 2. And I do the same thing to the numerator to keep the ratio equivalent. 40 times 2 is 80. So I know that Pat can make 80 cookies in 2 hours. So if I would want to write this answer sentence, I would write Pat can make 80 cookies in 2 hours. And that's a good answer sentence for my question. These are the tougher types of problems. I know these are tougher because they don't suggest going to the unit rate right away. And we will see a different way to solve this problem later on in the chapter. But for right now, please understand that unit rates can be helpful in solving other problems as well. So if we take our rate and turn it into the unit rate, we can do a little bit of problem solving. So if you want to see more examples of problems like this one, rewatch the Chapter 1, Lesson 1 video on Rachael Ray dog food. Okay, this was the last problem we did in the Lesson 1 video. That will help you see what it looks like with decimals. Here's what it looks like with fractions. Okay, please remember to keep making your flashcards for this chapter. Very, very vocab intense chapter. So I think we're up to maybe 4 or 5 words of vocab. So please make sure you're keeping up with them and studying those vocab words every night. Go ahead and do your practice problems. Ask any questions tomorrow in class.